let our listeners know some of what's happening in Gaza right now.
Yes, and I'll tell you how we are calling this and how we have come to arrive at our conclusion. So for us, Amnesty actually concluded since last year that what is occurring in Gaza is not just a humanitarian crisis, right? Because things did not randomly happen. There hasn't been a natural catastrophe or anything of the sort. This is a deliberately designed humanitarian crisis, and we've concluded that this is an ongoing genocide. We arrived at our conclusion in December last year, and we were only looking at what had happened, since following October, the horrific and atrocious crimes committed on October 7th, but the response that has been done by the Israeli government since until June last year. And already during that period alone, we were able to identify that what was happening is actually a genocide. And what do we mean by genocide? I want to start by clarifying that for those who are listening to us. For us, using the word genocide is not a question of opinion, right? It's not a personal opinion. It's not even about the mass amount of people who have been killed. There's a very clear definition of genocide, and that is the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. And when we look at what has been unfolding, the various most serious human rights violations that have been occurring since following October 7th to now, from the bombing, the relentless bombing of a civilian population, displacing them from one small corner to another on this tiny strip of land, which is Gaza, denying them, access to healthcare and facilities that they need, and constantly moving them from one area to another, while being under constant bombardment. And now, what has happened more recently, which I now think most Canadians are very familiar with, is the starvation, the deliberate starvation of people in Gaza, are all part of a pattern. Right, so that's really, really important to understand as we look at what's happening today. The starvation that we've seen on our screens, the starving children, this is not new. It's part of a pattern of actions, and it's happening to a people who have been bombed, moved around from one area to another, who can't access hospitals themselves being continuously bombed. All this for the past 20 months. So it is a disastrous situation. There are no words, really, to talk about this. I think we are out of words. And what is the most tragic part of this is that it's happening, it's live streamed, right? We're able to see this. And I think that a lot of people around the world are feeling a great sense of helplessness about what can they do. Most people are able to see that this is deeply wrong and requires strong action. But, Israel has been able to continue with this because it's been granted a large amount of impunity by the most powerful states, starting with the United States. But we're also not seeing states like Canada, who, have professed to being countries that uphold human rights, really respond as they should. So this is an absolute disaster, a humanitarian catastrophe, absolutely. Since the pressure that people have put on their governments lately, these governments have been able to pressure Israel, and Israel eventually agreed to renew, to start again the delivery of aid as of Sunday. However, we have to be really, really clear with the public. What's happening is really just a drop in the ocean. So what has resumed is the airdropping of, very small amounts of aid. Again, that in no way can cover the needs, the immense needs of the Palestinian population in Gaza. And so the issue is not resolved at all, far from it. And I'm really glad that you're having me on today to talk about this, to ensure that every Canadian is aware of what's happening on our watch, and that additional pressure is put on decision makers to right this wrong.
You talked about a designed humanitarian crisis. You also wrote a recent op-ed in the Hill Times, and I'm going to read a quote from the piece. Canada must move beyond carefully worded statements and take concrete steps to uphold international law. Public pressure can play a role in this, and Canada could do more than carefully worded statements. Could you expand on some things that could happen?
Yes, absolutely. I also wrote to the Minister of Foreign Affairs this week, and what I said in my letter was that we committed years ago to never again, the never again to genocide, and that again is now upon us, and we must act decisively. So first and foremost, Canada is part of the Genocide Convention. What does that mean? That means that any country that is part of the convention, once it is aware that there is a risk of genocide occurring, that's really important to highlight. The country does not need to confirm whether genocide is happening. As long as there's a risk, each of these countries is bound by international law to do all that it can to stop that genocide from unfolding. And that obligation is heaviest on countries who already have a relationship with that country. That's it's a logical conclusion. Sort of saying, if your friend, Carl, starts bullying someone else, you, because you're the friend, have a greater obligation than me, for instance, who's just a bystander, right? So that is the spirit of the convention. And so Canada, because of its long-standing relationship with Israel, and because it's part of the convention, has an obligation to act. And fortunately, all that we've seen so far are statements, as I said in my op-ed, very carefully worded, and really no action. And yet there are actions that Canada can take. First and foremost, Canada has done this, finally called for an immediate ceasefire. But the most important piece here is to end any arm export to Israel. So Canada announced last year that they had suspended new arms exports to Israel, because Canada has been exporting arms to Israel for a very long time. And so it suspended its new arms permit. But what it did not do is suspend existing contracts. So there's still a large amount of arms that are, going to Israel. And in fact, there's a report that came out today from other organizations, Palestinian Youth Movement, that actually point to ammunition being sent to Israel as early as last week, right? So the first and imperative need that has to be made by Canada is to end any type of arm export to Israel. Otherwise, Canada risks being legally complicit to the genocide that is unfolding in Gaza right now. Canada can also apply sanctions against the officials who are most implicated in these crimes. It's extremely important. Canada can use its leverage, it can use its international standing to recognize that what is happening is a genocide, and to really increase the public and the pressure on the state of Israel. It has not done so yet, right? Canada can join international justice mechanisms to hold Israel to account. It has not done so. So there's a range of tools and actions that Canada can take. And the question that I have constantly for Canadian officials is, if what is unfolding before our eyes and our screens was happening to Israeli children, French children, right, Australian children and population, Portuguese women, children, elderly, would Canada only be issuing statements? I think we know the answer to that very well. We know that Canada can do more. It has done so in the past, rightly so. Canada has been extremely active and took very strong stance regarding Ukraine, for instance. So we know Canada can do this.
I really appreciate you coming and joining us, and thank you very much for your time, Ketty.
Thank you for having me. Mm-hmm.